This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Doll, feeling a little rough, if you
Yeah,
ask
well, why
me.
not? We're meeting in the physics, so I feel great in reality. Um,
Well, you just got into Berlin, which is where we both sit now. From Hamburg, I got in from Barcelona. We're about to perform at the Hamburger Bahnhof Museum, where Mariana Simnit's installation Winner is still up, where I voiced the sound of the babies. And that's what we're doing. So,
I just had a thrilling 5 days in Hamburg.
do tell, do
Well,
tell.
the thing is, I'll name the names later when it comes out and all that stuff, but these are world-class musicians,
Like yourself.
and it was kind of like a time machine blast from the past. Because they used to, the record industry used to give big cash advances or even small ones that would allow you to
Something at least.
go into a studio and make a fucking record. I was there for fucking 5 days. I mean, incredible equipment. I actually didn't even leave the building for 4 days, basically. I don't know. Working with positive people who are world class musicians and being creative is rewarding. Let's put it that way.
Well, also, I mean, I think this is definitely the year, at least it's been my last 2 years. You said working with, what was the word you used? Positive?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, not just positive, not idiots. You say an idea, they get it.
Idiots are one thing, but it is really time to get rid of negative people who just, I mean, toxic people, actually, which I have gotten renounced about four toxic people in the last 2 years, and I have never felt better for doing it, must say.
Well, that's great. Unfortunately, though, because I'm in Europe, I did not get to see the debate, which I wish.
Which I did, of course, at 3 o'clock in the morning in Barcelona, and keeping me up till 5 a.m. when I had to leave at 8 a.m. to come to Berlin. But I have to say, there were some zingers in it.
Well, the question is, if you're undecided, I kind of question your intelligence. So, were they convinced with anything? I mean,
the answer is factism, not fascism. The question is the answer. The look on Kamala's face was enough to just shrink the narcissist down to the size he actually is. 6 inches. No, not even, excuse me. He might be 6 feet tall, but there's less than 6 inches from all reports. That doesn't matter. Speaking about something that's actually mega, I don't know if you heard about this mega tsunami that was triggered in Greenland, and it was by a landslide. Now, it was a 650 foot wave. Yeah. And it was detected like 3,000 miles away. I mean, it was absolutely gargantuan. It didn't hit us, but of course, implications for climate change and future
there's all this kind of nautical lore out
and
there.
you as a pseudo Viking would know.
Yeah, exactly. Which is about rogue waves, which are not tsunamis.
Yeah, a rogue wave.
And they're like out of nowhere, you're in the middle of the ocean, and fucking a 200-foot fucking wave appears, and they always thought that was like exaggeration. Well, since satellite technology, turns out they actually fucking exist.
Of course they exist. Like, haven't you ever watched Deadliest Catch?
Well, yes, but like, well, Perfect Storm talks about that. But yes,
exactly. Perfect Storm is a good one.
But a rogue wave, yeah, that's it makes sense, right? I mean,
well, going from the deep ocean and landslides to outer space, which is my usual trajectory anyway. Scientists from Spain and Japan have discovered a whole host of bacteria and fungi in a layer of Earth's atmosphere known as the planetary boundary layer or troposphere, including E. coli and organisms commonly found in underarms and groins.
What the fuck?
Now, their findings uncover a rich and unprecedented diversity of microbes that are dispersed by wind. And that's the thing, wind currents are not only carrying, microplastics, but microbes and bacteria for thousands and thousands of miles. So anyway, I know that nobody out there except for me probably reads the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, but I do recommend it. They unearthed more than 266 fungi, and 305 bacteria, which are well above the Earth's atmosphere. So this is, and also some were found to be, of course, resistant to common antibiotics, such as Micrococcus luteus, which sounds like your next band's name, Tim, which can cause infections.
It's my frat boyfriend.
I thought so. Which can cause infections in immunocompromised people. Anyway, I mean, that's just from the ocean to outer space. Terror is in the wings.
Well,
I of course thrive on.
Breathing in these microbes and these, particle fungi and all that stuff. Do you remember a story? I'm trying to refresh my memory about a person who inhaled something like that, and then like a mushroom was growing in his lungs.
Oh, terrifying!
Yeah. Like what the hell is that? And they went in there. I was like, actually, there's a mushroom in there. God. Yeah.
Well, I mean, mushrooms are the true aliens, as we like to propose on this podcast, at least. Now,
yes.
This next story actually kind of leads me to our guest today, who has written a book called Euphoric Recall. Peter Jesperson, who toured with the Replacements for a very long time, started Twin Tone Records. His career is absolutely phenomenal. But we heard a few grand stories, which he's going to unleash some of them on us.
Oh, yes.
Podcast. But this was kind of a sick incident that just happened in Washington, D.C., that kind of reminded me of what's on the podcast today. So there was a disgusting, quote unquote, performance by an unidentified male, which was filmed on a homeowner's security camera.
Oh, I saw this, yes.
It was called the Cucumber Encounter. Took place Friday afternoon at about 5:30. Now, the guy is walking around, and then he looks to check. He doesn't realize he's being, on the surveillance camera before making a twisted toy out of the cucumber. And the footage was posted by the homeowner. So he walked to the other side of the vehicle that was parked in the driveway and continued using the cucumber, which he had planted on the fence in a way that, of course, we can only imagine. And now there's high school students walking by, and the homeowners were absolutely. So then anyway, when he finally noticed the security camera, he put the cucumber back in his lunchbox and calmly walked away down a nearby alley. It was the eye contact that finally unsettled me, said the homeowners. And of course, he saves the cucumber for later. So, I mean, he could face a fine. I can't believe he can face a fine of up to $300 in 90 days in prison if caught and convicted for what? Abusing a vegetable?
Well, this reminds me, in middle school, bullying was pretty. I was in Massachusetts at the time. Bullying.
I never.
Bullying.
I know. I understand. No, well, that's how I learned to slap.
I did. Yeah, whatever. But
the bully becomes the bully.
Well, the thing is, with the boys, they'd rough each other up. The girls were really cruel, and they would they'd just really hang on to these things to, I don't know, just destroy these other girls for like ever. And suppose there's, I don't know if it's true, but this one girl supposedly was caught masturbating with a cucumber, and
it starts there. God knows where it ends.
But every time she walked through,
who caught her? Or was it? Or maybe
it's probably she was slut shamed, basically. And the girls that weren't getting any of themselves
she was veggie shamed.
Well, she'd walk through the hall and the girls would be like, cucumber.
God.
It lasted like a year. It was pretty cruel.
Yeah, well, the problem with cruelty from women, and trust me, people think I'm cruel. They have no idea how fucking nice I am. You can testify to that.
Yes.
Is that a lot of cruelty just comes from insecurity and the anger of being as well as the person should realize they are insufficient in their own mind's eye in order to not be cruel. To me, cruelty is too easy to do. That's where, as an intellectual sadist, I refuse to practice it unless I'm paid, taken to the stage. I'm just saying cruelty is just another mark of, of insecurity and fear of other, and women are specialists.
Well, there's
as well as men. I mean,
there's different types of cruelty. So there's obviously social cruelty that in reality is not even dangerous, but it's psychologically dangerous.
Yeah.
And I don't know, if someone claimed I masturbated with a fucking cucumber and they called me cucumber, I wouldn't even flinch.
Well, they'd be underestimating the obvious, Tim. Come on. I mean, let's give it a break. And that brings cruelty back to the debate, which you didn't watch, but I, as as somebody that concentrates on that which offends me, the look again on Kamala's face when the idiot, and I love that the one guy who was one of the moderators the next morning released a list of the 57 lies, that would be 57 flavors of lies, that the cruel orange clown, could not stop but repeating, most of them, especially the one about Haitians eating cats and dogs. Yeah. Is this just a continuation of the childless cat lady? Now we have so-called Haitians eating cats and dogs. And, by the way, hungry enough, so would I. Totally fictitious, and that's just to the extreme of the stupidity that American and a lot of politics have evolved.
But it's symbolic because Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere.
Hello, made by America, and to pick on the Haitians,
who's the only country that independently liberating themselves from fucking slavery and you know, an actual revolution for the better. Although obviously
it's a very flawed.
I mean, to pick on Haiti, how pathetic are you? I mean, it's so ridiculous.
Anyway, the cat, so to say, is out of the bag. This debate, and of course, I mean, when somebody is such an egotistical, narcissistic idiot that they claim that they want to debate when every poll in the fucking planet says you lost, sucker. But he refuses to re-debate.
Well,
let's just go back.
He refuses to. Okay, I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, he refuses to. So let's just go back, and it's on YouTube for all those that would like to follow. When he was first running, did a commercial, dumped Trump. Now, again, time to dump him in the fucking river. He can sleep with the fishes because you know what? He hasn't, he claims he wants to murder people and incarcerate them. Give him a taste of his own fucking medicine. And with that, I'd like to say it's the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl. Vote. We're not running. Otherwise, we'd both be running for president of Vice.
I didn't get to mention Elizabeth Foley lost her hand in a shark attack the last couple of days in Florida.
Well,
she saw a black man. She's like, "What's this?" Next thing you know, chomp.
Hungry enough, I need a human hand. What can I say? All right.
Give her a hand.
Give ourselves a hand. That is the Lydia and Spin with Tim Dahl, Lydia Lunch, and coming up, Peter Jesperson with Euphoric Recall. This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and our guest this day, Peter Jesperson, who has a very such a storied career that he just released a book called Euphoric Recall. And by the way, the title is great, Peter. And in reading the book, as I did today, because what Euphoric Recall is, it's negative experiences in the past might be viewed positively now.
That's right.
Get out of the gutter. And just to jump ahead, I loved also the last line in the book, which is that we can't explain it in words, but somehow music gives us a feeling we don't get from anything else.
Yes.
So congratulations on your book. It's a fatty.
Thank you very much. It was a long haul, and I didn't know really if I could even write a book. When I started, I probably was halfway through before I thought, this actually might be a decent book. So that was hard to kind of get my head wrapped around it. But once I did, I had fun.
Well, and let's just start at the beginning, because like as a teenager in your parents' basement with an unbelievable record collection, it didn't take long for you in the Minneapolis scene, at least, to start hanging around with those rapscallions, the Replacements.
That's right.
And that's what a lot of the book features on, is your both touring with them, managing them, releasing records with Twin Tone. And I'm always amazed when people write these kind of, your memory, were you taking notes the whole time, or is your memory that good that you actually remember where dates were, what happened, what clubs you played?
Well, I do have a kind of a surprisingly good memory for the amount of abuse I subjected my brain to, but I also I have a funny kind of uncanny ability to remember things that are dated by when records came out, or when I saw this band or that band, and it's all I've seen kind of through my life. Everything has been through a musical prism since I was about 5 years old. And
does that continue? Or is it these more formative kind of loggings in terms of your musical formative experience, in terms of listening stuff? I mean, I can relate to that 100%. That's why I'm bringing it up. But then I don't know. After 35, the years start. What happened? What year starts getting a little more blurry?
It does still. I do still date things according to when records come out. I often will remember something unrelated to music because, that's when, the last Broncho album came out or whatever it is. And, that's just.
As opposed to 9/11 or the Kennedy assassination, you view history by what records came out. And the thing is, you've worked on and with so many records. I mean, in the back of the book, the list of things that you worked on is incredible. And we'll go back and forth in history, but also one of my favorite songs, and we met him actually, Steve Earle, when Retrovirus played a festival in Spain last year. I had no idea Steve Earle knew who I was, but I love Meet Me in the Alley is one of my favorite songs. As a matter of fact, I sing it all the time. I might cover it and send it to Steve Earle. But you had a very diverse history, but all it in, in this kind of singer-songwriter, sometimes folky, sometimes Americana, genre that you seem to be the master of at this point in alternative music.
Well, I mean, I got what happened was I got hired by New West Records after we closed Twin Tone down in 1998. And there was a guy by the name of Cameron Strang, Canadian fellow from Vancouver, who was living in Los Angeles and had decided to start a record label. And he was kind of a one-man operation. And I had moved to LA in 1995. I'd worked out there a lot with the Replacements starting in 1983. But in 1992, we had licensed a number of Twin Tone masters to an LA-based company, which caused me to spend more time in LA than I had in the past. And at that point, that was where I, we worked Twin Tone for another couple of years while I was in LA, and then left there in 98, closed the company down, and I got the job offer to join New West in 99, and that was a roots kind of label, so it wasn't exactly my choice, and frankly, I got a little Americana-phobic being there for about 17 years. I thought, okay, I love this music, and we put out almost every record we put out I liked to one degree or another. It really was I think a remarkable run of records, but I thought there's more music than this, and I tried to bring in lots of other stuff. I brought in Vic Chestnut, or I brought in Chuck Prophet, and I guess if you want to squint, you can look at them as kind of having some roots element to them, but anyway, so I'm not strictly, I come from a Beatle background. I was a Beatle guy. That was when the light bulb went off over my head at the age of 9, seeing them on Ed Sullivan, like millions of others, so.
You might have been a Beatles fanatic, but I've yet to see it reflected in the records you put out. I'm just saying, that's just my opinion.
So the Beatles actually were a gateway to a lot of things for a lot of people, but there's also a curse. The Beatles inspired a lot of shitty bands. Like they basically created this wave that anyone can be in a band, which is cool, but
I can think of worse examples that inspired a lot. Anybody could be in a band, but than the Beatles. But they did do Helter Skelter, and actually, Helter Skelter is kind of what your career was like, even if that might not have been the song that inspired you from the Beatles, Peter. I'm just saying, I read the book.
Right. But wouldn't you say that also the Ramones inspired a whole lot of crappy bands that?
Oh yeah, of course.
I think Sonic Youth inspired the worst amount of crappy bands.
Yeah. But yeah, but they're also, the Beatles inspired, of course, a lot of great bands too,
Sure. Do you have a favorite era of the Beatles, or you use kind of like songs here and there throughout the whole spectrum?
Well, I like pretty much everything they did. I mean, I think all phases of their career was great, but I'd probably say if push came to shove, my favorite album would be Revolver.
Yeah.
But
do you think that, for instance, the Beatles, like hearing them at the age that you heard them, because sometimes, the things that we hear when we're really young, I mean, to me, it never reflected in the music I do, but I mean, I was very inspired by soul music and top 40 in the late 60s, early 70s, which is very different from what it became. I mean, because you could have Ball of Confusion, you could have Riders on the Storm within 10 minutes of each other.
Yeah, I think there's all, influences come from all different directions. And sometimes, we were talking about a song recently. Somebody did something that was supposed to have been based on the Beach Boys, and it didn't sound anything like the Beach Boys. Oh, I know. It was a Beatles song, actually, now that we're talking about it. It was Good Day Sunshine, I think McCartney said. He wrote that, and it was a Beach Boys-inspired song. I don't think it sounds anything like it, but through the ears of Paul McCartney, that's how it came out, Yeah,
it's interesting because what influences people and how it influences people. I mean, most pop music is pretty limited if you're really into music. And I love popular music. That's how I fell in love with music. But it's abstraction, and that's allowed me and a lot of people to just go further with it, even if it doesn't have anything to do with objectively what it originally was. It's kind of interesting how that works. I don't know how old you were when you fell in love with the Beatles, but did you fall into the marketed tribalism of Beatles versus Stones?
Not at all. In fact, I would argue with people constantly. It's like, I love both the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. Does that make me some kind of freak? I mean,
Right.
if somebody had said, you can only have one or the other, I mean, I would have picked the Beatles. I mean, I think they're the greatest rock and roll band of all time, but, but
Yeah, but I have to interrupt and say the Beatles never wrote Cocksucker Blues.
That's true. They did not. They did not.
I'm just, have to put that in there because that was a pretty monumental way to get out of a record contract. So
Peter, when you're younger and maybe partying more, who would you rather party with? LSD 1967 Beatles or hardcore drugging 1976 Rolling Stones?
Well, I mean, the dark drugs of the Rolling Stones era, I mean, I dabbled in some of those too, and I'm glad that I got out of it, alive. So, I would say the Beatles, LSD 66. I mean, that was I did take a lot of LSD for a period of time. And I got to say, I had some amazingly cool experiences on it. I think like one of the great, music experiences I had was seeing Jefferson Airplane on the Volunteers tour. While I was tripping on the acid was so good that me and 5 of my friends took it, and we realized none of us could drive to the concert. So we had to take a bus, and we were so high that we got thrown off the bus, and we tried to walk to the auditorium where the Jefferson Airplane were playing, and we were going entirely the wrong direction when miraculously a friend of ours from high school happened to be driving by and saw us walking down this street and said, "Where are you going?" And we said, "We're going to the Minneapolis Auditorium." He said, "You're going the wrong way, hop in." And he gave us a ride. If he had not done that, we would have walked off in our LSD oblivion and missed the entire show.
But do you believe?
What year was that?
That was, it was May 15th, 1970.
Nice.
And that's when acid was still good, because I mean, I also, as a youngster, I mean, I do think that if you could get your hands, as we did, on good acid at a certain period in your life, it does open the world up widely.
I agree. Like I
But,
couldn't take it.
it doesn't exist anymore. Let's face it, unless you're in Switzerland, a doctor. But
yeah.
But do you think that those moments? It's so weird. Do you think acid attracts magical moments like that, or do you think that's just total coincidence?
I think it enhances. I mean, I think I think pot, I quit doing everything long ago. I had a problem with alcohol in the early 90s, as Lydia was pointing out, the title of the book. But I quit drinking in 1991. So I'm 33 years sober. And all I do is I'm a weekend pot smoker, and I still love it. And one of my favorite things in the whole world to do is to smoke pot and listen to records. I mean, I'm sorry if that makes me like some kind of,
No.
You're not alone there. But I mean, don't you find pot really freaking strong now? I mean, I remember, look, when you're in the 9th grade, you're like smoking joint after joint. Now, if I took one hit, that would be it. And I'm not a lightweight, but pot is just fucking strong.
I got to Chicago yesterday. I ran down to a dispensary down the street and I got some pot, and you pick the strength. So right. I don't like it too strong, but I also don't like it too weak. Like my wife likes it super weak. I don't really like that so much. I enjoy smoking it with her, but when I smoke it myself, I like it in the high 20% THC range. That's about where I like it. Somebody handed me a joint the other day that it was 40%, and I said, I have to go take a nap now.
Yeah, understandable.
Have you ever been paranoid on the new strong weed?
Oh, sure. Yeah. But I mean, I'm pretty careful with it, but yeah, sometimes it has made me paranoid. That's why I stay away from it.
Yeah.
I've been paranoid once in my life. That's it. I think I caused paranoia in other people, but it's like a lot of emotions I find no use for. It's like delete once. That's horrible. How do people live in this thing? But paranoia, I just no.
A lot of people come to your work, Lydia, wanting to be paranoid.
Trust me, I know. I want to be paranoid, humiliated.
Well, whatever they want is not necessarily
to be loved. Some come to be loved.
Thank you, Tim. Whatever they come for, I hope they get it, because I'm giving it all I have. Anyway, let's go back to speaking about giving it. As somebody who was a big fan of music, as you were from a very early age, you had a very thankless job. The job of a road manager is absolutely freaking thankless. Although we thank ours because we have someone we love, Sebastian Greppo. But I mean, for the most part, it's a really brutal job with none of the glory, if there is any, especially touring in, say, the 80s and 90s. So how did you even manage to just put up with that when everybody else is getting ripped out of their fucking mind, acting like assholes, having supposedly a good time, and you have to drive the van and book the shows?
Well, I was, luckily Frank Riley was our agent. He booked the shows, and he was, one of the best, still is one of the best in the country. And I drank too much sometimes and couldn't drive. Luckily, we had a couple of roadies who could take over in those cases. But with the replacements, I never aspired to be their manager or their road manager. But I just thought they were so good, and there wasn't anybody else to do it. So I thought if they're going to get, they didn't even have driver's licenses. So I helped them get to gigs, and then they would say, well, what are we going to do next? And I'd said, well, we should look for another show. Do you want to play again next week? And they'd say, yeah. And then I'd find them a show, and it was that kind of stuff. So, it's just,
people don't realize too how we managed to do it before the internet. Get gigs. What the hell? And I do know Frank Riley, and shouts out to him because he goes way back as well.
You're more than just the road manager. You're also their agent. I mean, you have everything.
I wasn't their agent. Frank Riley was their agent. Went back when he had he was at Singer Management when I met him, and then he started his own company, Venture Booking. Then he was out in LA at Triad, and then he went up to the Bay Area and started High Road, which he still has. But yeah, no, I managed them, and I road managed them, and Tommy Stinson, the bass player, was 13 when we started, so I became his legal guardian so that we could travel out of state. And yeah, I let them, I wanted them to be able to write the songs, to perform the songs and record the songs, and then I just did whatever else needed to be done to facilitate that and getting them, in front of people in clubs, Do
you think that your experience working with boys that were so young and obstreperous and, so against the grain, going from like a great show one night to just going, fuck you, we're going to do, whether consciously or not, the worst piece of shit we could possibly manage to do and get away with it. Did that prepare you to have your own child? Because you had more than one at a time. You had like 4 or 5 kids at one point.
I have one kid. He's 22, and he's great. And he's been. We never had like the terrible twos or the terrible anythings. We
terrible teens. I mean, you had a bunch of babies that were in their terrible teens.
Yeah. Yep. So it did. I suppose in a way it did prepare me, because there was a lot of what I did with the replacements was babysitting, right?
That's exactly what I was getting at. It's babysitting.
Did you ever, I mean, to take it in a more serious direction, did you ever have to cock block or obstruct any potentially predatory or dangerous scenarios for these boys on the road?
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess that I talked them out of, doing things. I don't know if I would say, dangerous things. I mean, I certainly kept them away from dangerous promoters and other people who thought that they could do a better job than I mean, I think, originally when I was just kind of their helper, they were playing a place in Minneapolis called the Longhorn, and we had an altercation with the club owner, who was telling the band that they had to play. They were doing a show that night, and he said, I want you to play again day after tomorrow. And I was going, don't play a day after tomorrow, because you won't have any time to plug it, get your friends down there, get your own audience there. The guy will slip you $100 and you'll play for whoever's there. That's not how you want to do this. And the club owner said, wait a minute, do I have to talk to this guy every time I want to book you? And Westerberg kind of looked at me with a question mark on his face, like, can I say yes? And I went, yeah. And he said, yes, you do. And that was effectively how I became their manager right then.
By fending off some asshole that wanted them to do a gig that maybe nobody came to, and they couldn't even get the friends to because it's too short notice.
Exactly. And like I said, I'm not a sports guy, but I said in the early days, what I did was I actually ran interference. I tried to protect them from the people that were telling them they needed to do this and that. I said, there's no fucking rock and roll rule book. You got to just do this how you think it's best. And I don't think that's a good idea. If you do, okay, I'll support you. But I'm trying to tell you that's a bad idea. So, either trust me or you don't.
But you couldn't protect them from themselves.
Well, there's that, of course.
And because there was a lot of controversy and trauma involved, I imagine, and especially from reading the book, that was involved in working with the replacements for so long. First of all, they're very young. They're kind of popular on some points, and then again, kind of saboteurs on the other. they had great gigs and they had good opportunities, and did they even really want those opportunities? Kind of, because they knew what was at the end of that opportunity, because they were purist.
Well, see, I think that's what I think what you say. It did have a basis in a purity to extent. I think, I think there's something noble about the Replacements in that they could not play the game. And, we were coming up at the same time as REM, and we were good friends with REM. And in fact, I worked with REM for a bit, and, they were very happy to, the proverbial shake hands and kiss babies.
Oh, yeah.
The Replacements never did that kind of thing. And I admire REM for what they did, and I admire them as a band, and I love their music, but the Replacements weren't those kinds of people, and I admire that as well.
REM could spread their bloody millions around and help other people out. I mean, that would be really cool of them, but I guess they're just not that type of people. But no, back to, it was a purist kind of thing, because they just wanted to do what they wanted to fucking do, hell or high water. Whatever it was, they wanted to do what they wanted to do. And let's just talk about some of the other people you work with, because, I mean, and in this book, you go into quite a extensive, I mean, I would say, I don't know, a third of it is about your time with the Replacements. And also there was loss, I mean, within the band. There were, people were getting really fucked up and some were dying.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do at young ages.
Yeah, nobody died while the Replacements were together, but the original lead guitar player, Tommy Stinson's big brother Bob, died in 1995, far too early, and that was incredibly sad. Although it was not surprising. I mean, we you kind of wondered almost, for many years there, am I going to pick up the phone tomorrow and hear that Bob died? So it was a horrible thing to hear, but it was not a big surprise, I have to say.
Yeah. I'm always surprised that we haven't lost more people. I mean, and even coming up, out of New York during the AIDS period, which of course a lot of people were lost. Let's face that. Yeah, but musicians, I'm always amazed that there's a lot of us still out there kicking the ball into the referee's face.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Do you think there was a period with the Replacements, as they got more success and had to go through the filter of major labels, that they started compromising? Or maybe even against their own will. I'm not blaming anyone here. That basically it started veering off the spirits and the maybe integrity, maybe the focus. I don't even know, but it started losing its grip a little bit. Do you think there's a point that happened?
That absolutely happened, and I think that I started to see it when they were doing the Tim album, the first record we did with Sire in 1985 with Tommy Erdely producing. It was, they wrote some songs that I thought were trying too hard to, Paul was trying too hard to write anthems. And I think like a song called Dose of Thunder, I didn't think that was a very good song. I know a lot of people love Bastards of Young. To me, that's not a great Replacement song personally. But I can tell you one story in particular when they were doing what became Don't Tell a Soul. Warner's really had high hopes for them. And I remember Westerberg playing me some early tracks from it. And I thought some of them, like there was a song called We'll Inherit the Earth, but we don't want it. And I thought, oh, what is this? And he said, Peter, he said, this is supposed to be my dark pop album, and they want me to write Bastards of Young all over again. He really wanted to do Big Star Third then, and his own Big Star Third. And instead, he wrote I'll Be You, and he wrote, which I think is a great song, and a Talent Show, and Aching to Be. And I think there were some really good songs on that record, but there were also some kind of fake, I thought, songs that didn't ring true. And I agree with exactly what you're saying, Tim. Yeah, that did happen.
This really doesn't have anything to do with the Replacements, but in a way it kind of does. It's like, I'm just thinking of the Offspring for a minute, who started just doing their thing. And by the way, I do have a thing for Dexter. I have a thing for anybody who's a virologist, drives a plane, and has his own hot sauce. But do you really think that they're so smart that they could be stupid enough to write a song like Pretty Fly for a white guy? That's a specific talent. I always say, how dumb do you have to be? And you can't fake dumb to be pop friendly, because either you do have that kind of dumbness somewhere inside, even if you're a genius. You kind of have to be a genius to be that dumb. But you can't just try to pretend, fake it, or you can't squeeze. You're not going to be able to squeeze in. And also, there is a karmic curse around certain, in my opinion, certain people, certain acts, because you just got to do what you do the best you can do it, and you can only be that. And if you try to be something else, it's going to sound like shit.
Yeah, yeah.
Peter, it's interesting going back to the thing you said about Paul McCartney's influence, being influenced by the Beach Boys, and it's so abstract at that point, but somehow through his filter and his ears, it comes out in a certain way. I never saw early replacement shows, but I've checked out on YouTube, and just those insane performances, and then the replacements I knew because I was born in '75. Those records, by the time they reach a 12 or 13-year-old boy, they seem so corporate and not representative of the history I've read about that band. And some of this concert footage I saw, I was like, is that a different band? It seems so weird to me. And I guess if you're a huge fan of theirs, you could connect the dots, and you could actually, tie the trajectory together. But from the outside, it really just felt like it seems like a very different band than what the corporate.
Okay, but I have to interject with this, Tim. It's kind of, whether you like it or not, what people become. If they sound different than when they first started, it's better than writing the same fucking album for 20 years in a row. So just because you don't like it or I don't like it,
I'm not saying I don't like it.
I'm just saying there should be a difference.
When I see the videos and I see the crowds and their insanely high energy performances, and just whatever that room what was happening in that room, and then what was on a fucking cassette or something in '92, it's like it just feels different on every level. Am I wrong about that? Or am I wrong?
Let's just ask you this, Peter. What was your favorite and we're going to get off.
I wanted to answer my question, but go ahead.
Well, let me answer Tim's question. I mean, I think I'm not sure I hear what you're hearing. I mean, I thought they were very raw in the beginning, and they did Sorry Mom, Forgot to Take Out the Trash, and Stink, and Hootenanny was their very eclectic record that was kind of any style goes kind of thing. Then they did Let It Be, which had like some really incredible songwriting, and the great lead track I Will Dare, which I think is a pop, indie rock classic and stuff. But then when they got into Warner Brothers, they did get a little glossier, but I love some of that glossy stuff. Like I think their last album, All Shook Down, has some of their best songs on it. I mean, I think that's just a brilliant album. A couple of stinkers for sure, but like the title song, All Shook Down, I mean, is one of the greatest band epitaphs. That's Paul writing about this band is fucking over. When he sings lines like, they're throwing us trunks when you're starting to drown, I'm all shook down. I mean, it's too late for the trunks, Warner Brothers,
Were you ever able to say, because you have such a distinct sense of pure music, were you ever able to just jump in and go, you know what, 8 of those songs are really great and 3 of them suck?
I did that all the time.
I bet you did.
So
I
didn't listen to criticism.
Although I didn't necessarily say they sucked. What I would do is I would talk a lot about the ones I liked, and I would not talk about the ones I didn't like. And then that's how that worked. I don't like, if I don't like something, it doesn't mean it's bad. It means I don't like it, but
exactly. Exactly.
So when you smoke pot on the weekends and you listen to music, what are you listening to these days?
Now, what are you listening to now?
What am I listening to these days? God, let me think about what I did recently. Oh, well, there's, I mentioned it earlier. Do you guys know the band from Tulsa called Broncho?
No, I don't.
I think they're one of the best bands in the world, and they have been for many years. And they have a new album that's not out yet. I've been lucky to hear it called Natural Pleasure. I think it'll be out later this year, early next year. Anyway, that one is the singing is almost all unintelligible. You can't figure out what he's saying, and yet I feel so much emotion from it. I finally kind of reconciled myself to think I have to look at this. It's so emotive to me, even though I don't understand the specific words. It's like I'm listening to somebody sing in a language I don't understand, and that's okay. It's still, I still understand, I still understand there's a musical something that comes through. So that's one of the ones that I really play a bunch lately. There's a band from Nashville that I'm really crazy about. that they have a record that they've finished that isn't out yet too. They're calling themselves the Dying Teenagers, which I don't think is a great name. But anyway, that's another record that I smoke pot and I listen to that and I just go, this is fucking great.
Okay, Peter, I got to ask you about this because I am obsessed with this album, and it was Peter Davis, the booking agent, that sent it to me a long time ago. And
I know Peter.
And I think they only had one album, and it's Pearline. This is one of my favorite records, Pearline, for Western Violence and Brief Sensuality. And they have one song, High and Dangerous. All our friends are high and dangerous. And I am obsessed with this 10-minute long song. And if you don't know it, I encourage you to please listen to it. I'm going to listen to it immediately. And I can't even describe it as like storytelling in a song with a Western twang. I think you'd dig it. But Pearline, I mean, they came out of Cincinnati. You'd think they came out of like El Paso.
Pearline, P-E-R-L-I-N-E?
E-N-E, Pearline.
Okay.
I really love this album. And it just came and went, and there's nothing. And that's all there is.
How old? When did it come and go?
2006.
2006, okay.
It's something that I think people, I mean, I play that High and Dangerous constantly to friends, and they're like, who the fuck? And I'm like, exactly, and where the fuck? And how did they come out of Cincinnati? But sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
How often do you listen to music with no words?
All the time for me, but go ahead.
No, but I mean, do you listen to instrumental music that often? In ratio, it doesn't matter, I'm just curious.
I listen to classical music almost exclusively in the car in Los Angeles.
Okay.
I just because that there's so much, Los Angeles is a busy place, and traffic can be terrible. I don't succumb to the hating traffic. I just it's like when in Rome, what can you do? But
so what classical music exactly? Because Tim is kind of an expert, and also he didn't study under. But he's more of a jazz expert. He's
I like all that stuff. I'm just that's a good question. What do you like? What do you like? Or do you just kind of put it on, or do you actually have favorite composers?
I mean, I used to actually have lots of classical records in my collection, which were sold when I was poor in the late 80s and spending too much money on alcohol and drugs. But so when I listen, I mean, I listen to what they play on the radio, so I'm hearing somebody else, selecting. But I mean, Wagner, I think, is one that I really like.
Okay.
I was inspired because I believe it's Wagner that had a. Did you ever see the movie Death in Venice?
I never saw it.
Okay. Anyway, there's a scene in Death in Venice, a great scene. Dirk Bogarde and this young, I guess, Italian actor, where it's a possible homosexual relationship sort of thing, but there's a scene where Dirk Bogarde is very sad, and as he walks away, they played a Wagner symphony, and in the movie, it made me weep. And I've actually seen that performed live with an orchestra, and it was that same section made me weep again just by the association to the film.
Okay,
so,
cool.
But I don't know that I'm not well versed enough. I mean, I love the standards. I love Mozart, and I like Bach and Tchaikovsky, and
Okay.
I don't know a lot about
Tim, when you're going to listen to classical music, what do you put on?
All right. I mean, so I understand there's this generic term called classical that basically covers through composed Western music from
every term
now to like Renaissance. So, I mean, not to be a nerd about it, but there is classical music, and there's Baroque, and there's Romanticism. I'm into a lot of stuff. I'm into stuff I don't like, so I can hate on it. Late Romanticism is definitely not my favorite, but I prefer Baroque. If I'm going to listen to technically classical music, Haydn and Handel maybe over Mozart. Mozart's the greatest contribution to me that Mozart did was bringing Bach back into the public eye, because that was his hero, which is, I mean, Bach is just so essential for tonality. Of course, when people talk about it, I don't want to do too much of a tangent here, but it's funny if I play maybe someone that doesn't know a lot about music, and you play atonal music or dissonant music, they're like, what about a melody? Or even rap. They go, what about a melody? It's like, well, what's a melody to you? I mean, it's a motive that's developed within tonality, which Bach invented essentially. Before Bach,
Tim and I love rap, though, however, and not modern rap.
Western tonality. Before Bach, there was no Western tonality. So anyhow, it's interesting because the masters are the masters, and I'll criticize them, but come on, they're the fucking masters. And you have your preferences, but you can't. There's motherfuckers you can't fucking deny. Yeah. And
let's go back to Peter here on a minute. So Peter, Soul Asylum, REM, The Replacements, and then moving out to LA, and then so starting with Twin Tone, part owner in that, managing these rapscallions, on the road with them, moving then out to LA, but then post that you've had your hooks in so many albums. And so many, and again, back to this American folk thing. I mean, from Warren Zevon, Steve Earle, et cetera, Vic Chestnut, et cetera, and other people that you were still discovering. So are you out of that business now? In other words, to write your book? Did you step aside? It's such a bizarre position to be in, I'm sure, for you, a lover of music in a massive corporate organization that has only respect for numbers.
Yeah, well, it has been a problem, but we had our own label for 20 years, from 77 to 98, and then New West from 99 until 2016, and in 2000.
And that's a run. That's a run, my friend.
Yeah, and then in 2016, they announced that they were
downsizing.
Downsizing. I think it was restructuring was the word.
Okay.
And they were terminating my position, and they wanted to move the label to Nashville. And I'd been very vocal about, I love Nashville, but I ain't never moving there. And and so that could have been one of the nails in my coffin. But anyway, it was actually good for me to leave New West then. I'd been there. I'd had a great run there. But I thought we were making too many records, and I thought it was we were making so many records that it was unfair to the number of people we had on staff, and it was certainly unfavorable to all the artists we had, because you couldn't possibly work all of the records that we were doing.
What was your official position at that point with New West? I mean, were you like just looking for bands? Were you managing them? Were you like the coordinator? What was your official position?
Originally, I was brought in to do A&R, and to help pay my salary, I was doing film and TV licensing, which I was really not very good at, to tell you the truth. But part of that was that New West had mostly this roots music, and my wife has worked in the sync world for 35 years. And so I had a lot of help, a lot of advice from her and her friends and all that stuff. And everybody that I knew said, we can't use anything with a twang in it.
Well, but let me just interject for a minute, because one of my favorite songs that begins one of my favorite all-time television series, True Detective Season 1, Handsome Family.
Oh, right.
Did a theme song, and it's gorgeous. Yep, and that's full of twang.
Right. Well, exactly. I mean, it does work certainly in some instances. And of course, now the fear of twang has kind of gone away, and it's in more.
I love that. The fear of twang. Fear of twang has gone away.
With the Hanson family, those kids that did that 90s hit, is that
they were around? Yeah, they were. Yes, and they did. One of their songs is the theme for True Detective. My favorite, McConaughey and Woody Harrelson.
Peter, do you have insight with those people? Were they like some homeschooled Christians or something? What happened there? Like,
no, not the Hanson brothers, but the Handsome family.
Oh, I thought that's what you referred to.
Please. Hey, leave that out of the mix. Thank you.
Right. But after finish your Lydia, I was originally A&R and film and TV, and then I was A&R and production, and then I was production and catalog. They took me out of A&R because they got tired of me bringing them all these things that they didn't want to sign.
Oh, interesting.
I throw my hands up in the air because you're dealing with people, you've dealt with so many people that are purist, and that's it. You're kind of, even from the beginning. I mean, look, back when you and I started, whether it's a record label or being a band, we had the opportunity to be as we wanted to be. That became less and less so if you want to survive. I mean, not for me, because whatever, I'm a juggler. So, I mean, my field is open. But I mean, there's not many in the circus tents like I am. But they became more difficult because, it's numbers that matter, not integrity, not the soul of a musician. But you didn't give up, and you didn't stop until eventually, come on, let's be real, you had to do something else.
Well, no, I mean, I haven't stopped. Once I got away from New West, I started just doing my own stuff. We resurrected Twin Tone to do a new album by an old group we'd worked with called the Suicide Commandos. That was a several month project, and it was a fucking blast. I did a bunch of reissues, including a Soul Asylum series of Soul Asylum reissues with a LA reissue company called Omnivore, which is a very good, archival company. I did, I work with a lot of, young bands, and it's one of the things I like the most, the bands that aren't necessarily looking for a major label deal. They just want to make records and they want people to hear them. And so I try to help them, get through the process of recording and making, whether you're doing a digital record or you're doing a vinyl record, or even as some people are still making CDs these days. I try to guide them through that process. I'm really good at getting vinyl made because I've done it for 50 years.
And vinyl is where it's at right now. And also, I mean, archives are very important. And I mean, I deal with an Italian label, Radiation, who are releasing everything Teenage Jesus forward, and just to keep it in vinyl and to keep it out there, because sometimes it takes people 40 or 400 years to catch up to what some people are doing. So I think the archival thing is so absolutely important.
I agree.
What was good then is still good now. If it was good, and I just think it's something like Jesus Lizard and their revamp, it's like, it's important. What was good then, still be good now.
Yeah. I'm curious what you mean by you're good at getting vinyl made, because I know for some of my bands, obviously you try to put something in production, a very low amount of records being produced, and basically suddenly it's like it's going to take X amount of months. It's been extended because whoever, Radiohead or whoever's is putting out this record, and the plants basically can't keep up with the demand. So when you say you're good at getting vinyl made, do you have can you cut through red tape? Can you actually push shit through? Because a lot of independent musicians
reveal the secret, Peter. Reveal the secret.
We get beaten down now with the new neo vinyl craze. A multi-million record selling band.
Get in line.
It's going to have priority. Exactly.
Right. Well, I certainly ran into that. Here's a funny story about that. I was trying to get a Christofferson. We'd made a couple of records with Chris Christofferson, which was a great honor. Which
I'm sorry to say, but how much further up the ladder can you frickin' go if you're dealing with a specific kind of singer-songwriter? Come on. Really?
I'm not sure what you're saying.
Well, how much further up the ladder can you go? I mean, you're working with Chris Christofferson. Give us a break here. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, pay attention, people, right?
But Madonna just re-released her shit on through Target or some shit like that.
So with Christofferson,
go back to the Chris Christofferson story.
With Christofferson, we had the CD in production, and we were trying to get the vinyl made, and suddenly the plant tells us they're not going to be able to deliver on time because Columbia was repressing the entire Pink Floyd catalog. And I had to tell Chris Christofferson that his vinyl was going to be 3 months after the CD came out. That was a sad time. But Tim, to answer your question, what we did, like for instance, we dealt with a pressing plant, and I'm not going to mention names because I don't want to get any, pressing plant managers in trouble. But I mean, we realized at a certain time at New West that we could probably, within our budgetary constraints, we could manufacture roughly 10,000 pieces of vinyl a month. And so a lot of that was catalog repressing records that we'd run out or getting low on copies of. But other times, if we suddenly had a new album come in, we could say, let's take the catalog pieces off your pressing plant, your pressing machines next week, and let's put our new release in there. So we could, we had a standard, monthly allotment that we would press at a plant. And then we could sneak the new releases in when we needed to. So
because you were a regular customer. I mean,
but that's very clever. I like this. Yes.
Yeah. So that worked well. I mean, these days the vinyl is like, it's about 9 months out. I think people say you deliver a master, it's 9 months before you get your masters back.
In America, in the US.
There's a follow-up point, because a lot of people argue just because there's just less pressing plants. And the old vinyl masters, the masters of old vinyl mastering are dead, and it's almost in a weird way a lost art, and that basically the quality control's gone down. So even if you waited that time, you actually might get a bad batch, which happens sometimes for sure.
That's
and
true,
I don't know if you've ever run into that.
But you start out with an acetate, you make sure the acetate sounds good, and then you go to actually make a mother, and you press a test pressing, and you make sure the test pressing, sounds good. So, I've been doing this, making vinyl since 1977. So these days, there aren't as many people around have been doing it as long as I have.
There you go.
Vinyl master.
At the same time, I can't compete with, say, Cheryl Pavelski, who runs Omnivore Records. She can hear shit on vinyl test pressings that I miss entirely. I mean, her ears are so well tuned, and I'm not in her league, but I'm still pretty damn good at it. So I'm a good guy to help a person.
Great answer. This is a very satisfying answer. I like that.
Yeah.
Your ears have not been damaged by the damage you had previously done, except, of course, the last 30-something years, to your psyche by working with those who you have worked with and by imbibing in the things that, the youth is meant to imbibe in, at least in those golden times of old.
Right.
How big is your record collection?
Oh, I haven't counted. I think actually I had to rearrange and alphabetize my 45s recently. So I've got about 6,000 of those, which isn't so many. I had probably 5 times that and sold some over the years. I don't know how many pieces of vinyl I've got. I probably got, I don't know, thousands of some kind.
Thousands.
I just don't count. But
I don't even have all my own vinyl. Go ahead.
I was just saying I'm staying in a hotel here in Chicago where the kind of lounge lobby area is built like a library. I don't know if you've ever been here, the Zachary, right across the street from Wrigley Field. Beautiful hotel, and it feels like a library in there. And I feel it's like I never feel more comfortable than when I'm in either a record store or a library. I love being surrounded by records, and I love being surrounded by books.
Well, books. It's funny because V. Vale, from research in San Francisco, a good friend of Lydia's. And he's got his publishing. If you're in a valley of books, paper, I mean, of course, San Francisco, if there's an earthquake, you might get crushed.
No, if you have never been to V. Vale's house, I always fear when I stay there, I am going to be earthquaked by 1,000 books on my head because every inch of the space is covered with books. But by the way, there is nothing like the smell of an old book. Vinyl doesn't really have the same smell.
No, it's a different smell, but it absorbs so much sound that you can really sleep deeply. And this is leading to a question: have either of you ever taken a nap in a library intentionally?
Only at Vivale's house.
I have not.
You're like in the middle of nowhere. I got downtime. I gotta take a nap. You go to who's gonna bust you for taking a nap in a library? I don't think it's. And
wait, I have to say this. I love that the Brooklyn Library a year ago, there were a bunch of kids that were rebelling against the internet, and they were sitting on the steps of the Brooklyn Library with notebooks and pens.
Oh, I heard about this.
Resisting the internet. And I thought, now that's a rebellion.
So Peter, I mean, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, the formative years of your love affair with music and popular music is the period where the album was made. It's the industrialized recorded music starts in the single, goes to the album, and now in the MP3 and the digital era, we're back to the single again. And of course you have a lot of 45, so it's not like you're ever against a single or anything like that. But how do what do you think about the society's relationship with music, this album relationship versus the single? I mean, it's a different relationship. The duration's different. The experience, you don't flip a record. There's no pause. And of course, I would say, before we let you to this, the downfall was the CD, in the sense that the duration of a CD could be longer than any vinyl. And it kind of just led to this kind of like 75 minutes. It's just a different chunk of time for music than 35 minutes, or 45 minutes.
Yeah. I think, I think the song is the most important thing. So 45s, that's how I first heard music, was the radio, buying 45s or whatever. When albums came in, I learned to love albums, and I like having something that kind of has a beginning, middle, and end that involves music. like a complete set of songs that may or may not be truly related, but somehow work together in a great way. And now we're kind of back to the a la carte world again with the download or with streaming and whatnot, which is fine. But at the same time, I still think it's important for those of us who are in the record making part of the business to make albums and to be very careful about the way one sequences albums, because I think a sequence is extremely important, even if 90% of the world is going to chop them up and listen to, them, a la carte, that's fine. I feel it's still my job to make albums. I'm working with a couple different people right now where we had a very intense discussion about a sequence. And actually that's another, I'm not very good at blowing my own horn, but sequencing is one thing I've done a lot of, and I think I'm very good at. And part of that,
it's very important.
It was part of that was because when I was growing up and I knew I was going to do something in music, but I wasn't sure what it was. At that time, I thought being a DJ is what I was going to be. And being a DJ, the order that you play songs in, of course, is important, like the sequence of songs on an album. So
I had to bring it back to literature as well and bring it back to the library, because it's the same with a book. It's very important what order the chapters are in. And that's no different than in music. I mean,
that's a great analogy, Lydia.
Well, that's a great
analogy, Lydia.
It's a great analogy if you care. But I know with executives in the record industry, if there's a flagship, clearly the hit of the album, they're going to demand it's the first fucking one. And
let me tell you this. I was asked by a guy who was putting a record together, a guy who was a record company president who shall not be named. And he said, would you help me with the sequence on this? And I said, yes. And I spent a lot of time with it. And I have this thing that I've been doing almost all my life where I make index cards and I lay them out on the floor and I write song title, I write the song time, I write a little bit about how the song begins.
You storyboard it. You storyboard
what the tempo is. I storyboard it. I put the tempo in there and all that stuff. And then I move them around like puzzle pieces. And so I did this for this record I was asked to do it for. And I said, okay, here's the sequence. I sent it to him and he said, well, this is great, Peter, but I need single number 1 is track first.
Yes, exactly.
Number 2, track 2, and single number 3, track 3. I was like, well, why the fuck did you ask me to sequence it?
That's ridiculous.
I also said I should not be working for a record company that thinks that's how you should make albums.
Good for standing up. I mean, there is a thing, with an LP, the closer you get to the center, the fidelity does go down.
It depends on who you have cutting the record. And I think finding the right vinyl cutter is extremely important. And I think a lot of people will spend lots of money going to the big dudes, the Bernie Gunmans and the Sterling Sound or the, who's the guy up in Maine? Ludwig.
Bob Ludwig.
They're all fantastic. I mean, gifted people, but I do think that you can find people to master that, to cut vinyl masters rather, that can, help with that issue that you're talking about there, Tim, that, like somebody like John Golden at Golden Mastering in Ventura. I think the guy's a wizard. I mean, absolute wizard.
Well, I mean, so going back to Bob Ludwig, and this was interesting because this guy's an incredible, I mean, he's one of the best of the best mastering engineers. But the fact is, when we get older, just like anything, our eyesight, the hairs in our ears and all that stuff goes down. Can you be a great mastering engineer at 80? I mean, maybe. I don't know.
Wait, I have to interrupt and say, I saw an interview with Bob Woodward, excuse me, one of the best political writers. He's 80. He has lost nothing. I have to always bring it back to a guy that wrote 24 books. I'm sorry. And we are here with the Lydia Spin, myself, Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Peter Jesperson, who's worked with so many people, Twin Tone, the records, the Replacement, Soulless Sound. That's just the beginning. REM, Steve Earle, Vic Chestnut. The list goes on. And I loved the end of your book where it had just the list of the records, which went on for page after page after page of people in one form or another that you have helped either with sequencing or just managing or just encouraging. It was very impressive, and I thank you for that, being part of that history. Your new book is called Euphoric Recall. And again, because I love the definition of it, which we can all relate to, which is having a positive reflection on what might have been a very negative experience sometime in the past. And that's basically what this book is. And not that you're trying to paint a pretty picture on the life of the shit we've all had to suck down. You're telling it like it was and like it is, from your perspective about these incredible people you've worked with and have still continued to work with. And for that, we're very happy to have had you on board.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be on your program.